Welcome to Western Perspective. I'm Helene Fong. History was made following the miracle election win for the Morrison government, with the appointment of an Aboriginal MP taking up position as Indigenous Affairs Minister for the first time. During a candid interview for Western Perspective, Minister Ken Wyatt revealed his agenda for Aboriginal people in the next 3 years. His first priority is to confront the issue of Aboriginal youth suicide.
Minister, welcome to the program and congratulations again.
No, thank you very much.
Must be a double happiness for you then. The Chinese phrase literally comes into play.
It does. What's interesting is there's a Chinese restaurant I go to, and Jan, who I've known for some time, travels backwards and forwards, and she said to me when I won the election and then was appointed Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, she said, she used a Chinese expression, she said that means you've been double lucky.
You were given this historic portfolio, but then it took quite a while, didn't it? I mean, don't you think that, why didn't previous governments thought about this?
Well, primarily because you've got to have an Indigenous candidate who has stood, won a seat and is in the Parliament. Because we don't have special provisions to appoint people to the Parliament, they have to be elected. And we'd reached a point in Australia's history where there were 5 Indigenous Australians in both the Senate and the House of Representatives. So whoever was in government this time had an option to appoint an Indigenous Australian to the portfolio.
Okay, so that means theoretically that Indigenous people aren't so active in politics then, isn't it?
No, not really. At the federal level, but we have been at the state and territory level. We've got a long history of people who've stood for state seats and have won them. Ernie Bridge here in WA was the first Indigenous minister in the West Australian Parliament, and then it was followed by Carol Martin and many others. So we've been successful in that regard. Let's
travel back in time, and if I was able to travel back in time and tell you as a kid form that you're going to be the Minister for Indigenous Affairs, what would you think?
Unless you're a Time Lord, I would have said no way. Because I grew up in the 50s and 60s. Australia had some very strong views that were a carryover from many years and many decades before about the capability of Indigenous Australians. And I was asked to stand for the seat in 2003 and I declined.
Why did you decline?
Well, I declined for 2 reasons. One was I'd made a commitment to go to New South Wales and head up Aboriginal health. And secondly, I didn't think that the people in the seat of Haslutt were ready for me to be their candidate and win the seat. Whereas in 2010, different mood in Australia. Reconciliation Australia had done substantial work in engaging people in considering recognition within the Constitution. A younger cohort of those that are under 35 had a stronger sense of social justice, and Australians had changed in their attitude, and that's why 2010 was a better time for me to have gone in.
Okay, so when you are standing in as an MP back then, have you ever thought that you would ever end up in this position?
I thought I might end up with a portfolio of some description, depending on how many terms I was in the House. And the outcome has been tremendous. The first appointment to an Assistant Minister of Health, assisting a good friend, Susan Lee, who was Minister for Health, and then eventually being responsible for Indigenous health and aged care as a Minister, to now being within the Cabinet. Incredible transition of responsibility, but an opportunity now to affect a future in a slightly different way.
Now, there are many issues in your portfolio, and obviously it's very wide range, from basically from young people's welfare to remote communities, and then to other addiction issues amongst your people. It's going to be very hard for you to get on top of it all, isn't it?
In one sense, no, because I've been immersed from a life experience in all of this stuff. I grew up in poverty. I know what it's like to hunger, or to have the only meal that night was the rabbits I trapped or the kangaroo we'd got. So I've been on that side with hand-me-downs, etc. So I know how families struggle and how we make assumptions that they're coping when in fact they're not. So bringing that experience plus my work in both health systems and in education systems and an understanding of the public sector and all the reading gives you a breadth of knowledge, but not the finite detail of portfolio responsibilities. So the Minister for Education will have a number of programs that target Indigenous students and youth. I've got to get across those so at least I have an understanding of the level of detail as to what we're doing as a government on the finer points. I know in the breadth of education there's a lot that we're doing, but I need to join all the dots to finish off that picture of education as it relates to our people.
What does your appointment mean for young people, in particularly young Aboriginal people?
I think the most telling was when I did the reconciliation speech on Friday. I had 3 young people in that audience who came up to me and just stood. One of them had tears in their eyes and they just said, "Can I contact you in a couple of weeks' time because I want to go into politics?" And another one that came up said, "I want you to help me take a pathway into the political arena." And I've said to the 3 of them, it doesn't matter which party, I'll give you the understanding that you need in order to make that decision when you are ready. But I said you have to join a party. I said to stand as an independent requires a lot of work and a key and critical issue. Whereas if you want to be in a government, then you have to join one of the 2 major parties. But I've had those discussions with a number of people probably over the last 6 years. And it was great to see 20 plus Indigenous Australians stand in the last federal election.
There is certainly an increased activity. Therefore, do you believe the next generation is going to rise up and make the change? Because there's a lot of debate that say, all right, should we have the 3rd chamber in Parliament right now?
Well, there was the voice out of the Uluru Statement wasn't talking about a 3rd chamber as most people might think it meant. What I get a sense of in talking to people who were there was what they want was a voice in respect to the issues they face that will go into the Parliament and be debated. And there's ways of doing that. And our government started the process of empowered communities, and the Minister meets with the empowered communities. So it's a model that's evolving. It's a model that will serve a purpose. But there's further work to do on constitutional recognition and asking for a definition around what was meant by the voice.
What is your strategy going forward in the next few years?
Actually, principally, I want to consolidate all the programs that we have in place, consolidate them in a way that addresses local issues, so some flexibility, because variation across a geographic diversity is significant. The other is to partner with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, because change can be talked about and implemented from the top, but implementation has to trickle down to all of those who need to be involved into putting into place the changes and reforms that we need, or consolidating programs that are working to make them more effective.
What will be the first priority you have for young Aboriginal people or young Australians?
Tackling Indigenous suicide. The rates are far too high. I just came out of a meeting where we talked about the challenges the frontline workers face, the simplistic elements that make a difference to an individual who's contemplating suicide and the reasons why that was just explained to me. But also helping in instances where suicide occurs, the family who are affected by the sudden loss of someone that they did not anticipate that occurring.
What has been the community's reaction of your appointment?
Actually, it's been incredible. The congratulatory letters, when I did the reconciliation speech at the Burswood, I walked up on the stage and I didn't anticipate 2 things. One, that there would be around 1,300 to 1,400 people in that room, I didn't expect a standing ovation, nor did I expect to see the number of tears that flowed from individuals. And when I finished and I was about to leave, somebody asked me if they could take a couple of photos. About 300 people later, I finally got out of there. But every one of them expressed immense pride, both our people and non-Indigenous Australians. So it's been overwhelming, but my challenge is the expectation of our people for me to deliver.
When you see the tears in their eyes, what do you feel?
I feel a sense of pride in that, not me making history, but me being an Indigenous person in the cabinet of the government that makes decisions for this nation over the next 3 years. They're immensely proud. They may not agree with everything that I espouse as a minister, but what they have all said is, you make us so proud that we've got an Indigenous person within cabinet and within the parliament. They are equally as proud of Linda Burney as they are of Pat Dodson, as they are of Malandiri. So that sense of pride from our people is about recognising that we've done the hard work to get there, but we are from their communities.
Final question is, what can Aboriginal people, particularly the younger generation, expect for the next 3 years?
They can expect us to focus on better educational pathways and more coming through to take their place in tertiary studies. They can expect us to look at work opportunities and focus on better pathways for them. They can expect us to focus on Indigenous suicides and trying to reduce those. In fact, I would love to eliminate them, but there will always be an individual whose ultimate sense of futility and expectation of life has reached a point where they make that terrible decision. They can expect me to partner with the process of co-designing what we do. So it just won't be me and my department. It'll be myself, my department and them.
Ken Wyatt, thank you so much for talking to us, and congratulations again.
No, thank you very much. It's always great to talk to you.
Next week on Western Perspective, we'll look into the development of NDIS housing in Perth. Until then, it's back to you, Ivan and Danielle.
Thanks, Elaine. This week's main news again. One Nation WA leader Colin Tinknell revealed the party's future directions following the sudden exit of Charles Smith. During a special interview, he defended the party's achievements in protecting local jobs and holding the government accountable. He also accused Mr. Smith of not being a team player.
And that's our news for this week. We have the latest on our website and Facebook page.
Until next Sunday after 8, good evening.
Good night.